In the year 636, a monumental conflict unfolded that would forever reshape the balance of power in the Middle East. This was the Battle of Yarmouk, one of the most decisive military confrontations between the Byzantine Empire and the rapidly rising Rashidun Caliphate. The stage for this clash was set during the early years of Islamic expansion, just a few years after the death of the Prophet Muhammad in 632. The Muslim leadership under Caliph Umar ibn al-Khattab began a series of bold campaigns to expand beyond the Arabian Peninsula. Syria became a crucial target not only for its strategic location, but also for its wealth and access to major trade routes. Early Muslim military operations in the region were carefully planned, relying on strategy rather than brute force. But soon, the Byzantine Empire, one of the most powerful forces of its time, began to respond with strength. The Muslim armies, initially smaller in number, called for reinforcements. That's when one of history's most brilliant military commanders entered the stage, Khaled ibn al-Walid. Sent from Iraq by Caliph Abu Bakr, Khalid's mission was simple: reinforce the invasion and lead it to victory. In July, the Byzantines suffered a crushing defeat at Ajnadain. Damascus fell in September, followed by the fall of Fal, which broke the last major Byzantine garrison in Palestine. That victory gave the Muslims a powerful foothold in the Levant. When Abu Bakr died in 634, his successor Umar decided to push the expansion deeper into Syria. Although Khalid's campaigns had been successful, he was replaced by Abu Ubaidah as commander. The Muslim forces advanced north along key trade routes. Tiberias and Baalbek surrendered with little resistance, and Emesa followed shortly after. But the Byzantines were not going to accept these losses quietly. Emperor Heraclius, realizing the gravity of the situation, ordered a massive military expedition to retake Syria. He appointed the Armenian general Vahan to lead a force of around 60,000 soldiers. In May 636, Vahan's army marched towards Syria. As the Byzantine forces advanced, Abu Ubaidah and Khaled made a strategic decision. Instead of engaging head-on, they tactically withdrew and regrouped near the Yarmouk plains, close to the Arabian Peninsula. Vahan pursued them, confident in his numerical superiority. The Byzantine army was a powerful coalition. The right flank was commanded by the Greek general Gregory the left by the Slavic prince Conatir, and the center consisted of Armenian and Ghassanid troops under Jabala and Dairjan. Vahan, instructed by Emperor Heraclius, initially attempted diplomacy. He offered the Arabs gold and provisions to return to their homeland, or at the very least, tried to delay them until reinforcements from the Sasanian Empire could arrive. Meanwhile, the Muslim commanders stalled too, waiting for their own reinforcements from Caliph Umar. For 3 long months, negotiations dragged on. Finally, the talks collapsed. Vahan positioned his camp near Alausa, guarding a key Roman road between Egypt and Syria. His troops were arrayed along the Yarmouk River. On the Muslim side, warriors prepared for what they knew could be the decisive battle for control of Syria. Before the full engagement began, warriors from both sides stepped forward to challenge one another in single combat. One by one, Muslim fighters struck down Byzantine officers, stoking Vahan's anger and pushing him to unleash his army. The Byzantines held a clear numerical advantage, around 60,000 soldiers, to the Muslims' estimated $40,000. Vahan ordered a forward push, testing the Muslim lines. As the first day ended, both sides pulled back with minimal casualties, each side assessing the other's strength. But Vahan wasn't done. The next morning, he tried to catch the Muslims during their dawn prayers, hoping to launch a devastating surprise attack. But Khaled, anticipating this tactic, had placed scouts all across the field. His cavalry and infantry were ready. Vahan's plan was to pin down the Muslim center while smashing through their flanks with overwhelming force. And at first it seemed to work. On the right flank, Conatir's Slavic cavalry pressed hard against the outnumbered Muslim infantry. Amr, the Muslim commander on that side, rushed in his cavalry to slow the Byzantine charge. The situation became desperate. Muslim soldiers were pushed back toward their camp. But then something unexpected happened. The women from the camp, the wives and families of the warriors, rushed forward. Some joined the fighting. Others used camels to create a moving barrier, terrifying Byzantine horses and halting their advance. What was supposed to be a decisive strike turned into a brutal, chaotic struggle. The Slavic cavalry, unable to control their horses in the panic, lost their momentum. Khaled seized the opportunity. He ordered his cavalry to flank the exposed Byzantine lines. The counterattack struck hard. Conatir's men, unable to hold, began to retreat in good order. Veteran soldiers who knew how to minimize disaster, but the momentum had shifted. On the left flank, however, the situation was worse. Yazid's forces faced the Greek general, Gregory's infantry, pushed back and outnumbered. The Muslim left was on the brink of collapse. Byzantine cavalry broke through, driving them toward their camp. Once again, it was the Muslim camp women who hurled insults and rocks at their retreating men, shaming them into holding the line. Yazid regrouped and stabilized his forces just in time. But they were hanging on by a thread. Khaled, sensing the critical moment, galloped his cavalry across the battlefield to reinforce the left. He also sent Dawar ibn al-Azwar on a flanking mission against the Byzantine center to block reinforcements. This maneuver proved decisive. With their center locked in combat, the Byzantines could not support Gregory's right. Khaled's cavalry smashed into the Greeks, turning their steady advance into a chaotic retreat. Gregory's men began falling back, suffering heavy casualties. A psychological shift swept through the battlefield. The Byzantines, once confident, now feared being outflanked. As night fell on the second day, both sides pulled back. For the Byzantines, the death of Derjan, one of their key commanders, was a severe blow. For Khaled, it was proof that mobility, not numbers, would decide this battle. On the third day of the battle, General Bahan decided it was time to change his strategy. His plan was clear: strike hard at the Muslim right flank, where his heavy cavalry could bring the greatest damage. Then break the line and encircle the rest of the Muslim forces. The morning sun rose over the Yarmouk plains, and the two armies prepared for another day of brutal combat. Bahan's troops surged forward with renewed aggression. The Armenian and Ghassani divisions in the center advanced steadily, while Jabala and Kanater unleashed their cavalry against the Muslim right. This time the impact was devastating. The Byzantine heavy cavalry slammed into the lighter Muslim cavalry with overwhelming force. Men were knocked from their horses, shields splintered. The sound of metal striking metal echoed across the field. Slowly, the Muslim lines began to give way. Conatir's forces pressed harder, and Amr's soldiers, already exhausted from the previous days, were being pushed back step by step. It was exactly the scenario Bahan had planned for: wear them down, break their flank, and roll up the line. But just when the situation seemed bleak, Khaled made his move. His cavalry surged forward in a perfectly timed counterattack, striking at the exposed Ghassanid flanks. His maneuver created panic and confusion among Jabala's men. Amr, seeing Khaled arrive, rallied his troops. The Muslim right stopped retreating. What followed was a brutal close-range melee. The Byzantine cavalry, trapped and outmaneuvered, began to lose cohesion. Jabala's flank faltered. Conatir's men tried to hold, but with their allies falling back, their line became stretched and vulnerable. Under relentless pressure, they finally began to withdraw in disarray. Khaled's tactical genius was once again on display. With a smaller force, he had managed to absorb a massive cavalry assault and turn it into an opportunity. This would become one of the key turning points of the entire battle. Bahan's fourth day on the battlefield started with the same plan. He sent Conatir and Jabala forward once again, hoping to finally crush the Muslim right. This time he held back his Armenian and Greek divisions, moving them at a slower pace to join the attack later. The Slavic cavalry crashed into the Muslim lines. The Arab light cavalry struggled against the heavily armored Byzantine cataphracts. On the left, Gregory's and Bahan's main forces advanced steadily. Closing in, Khaled recognized the danger. His army had taken significant losses over the previous days. He didn't have enough men to defend both flanks if the Byzantines launched a full assault. He had to act fast. Khaled sent Yazid and Abu Ubaidah forward on the left to slow down the Armenian and Greek advance. This was a desperate attempt to buy time. Then he rode toward the breaking point between Amr and Shurabil's forces on the right, where Jabala and Conatir were pressing hard. On the left flank, things grew even worse. Byzantine archers rained down volleys of arrows. Yazid's and Abu Ubaidah's troops suffered heavy casualties. Unable to withstand the constant barrage, they were forced to retreat to escape the killing zone. Bahan saw the Muslim left faltering and pushed his advantage. Gregory's Greeks advanced, threatening to break through entirely. If the Muslim left collapsed here, the entire army could be surrounded. But something remarkable happened just as it had on the earlier days. The women in the Muslim camp armed themselves and joined the fight. Their desperate resistance inspired the Muslim soldiers. With renewed courage, they held the line against superior numbers. Meanwhile, on the right flank, Khalid's cavalry reinforced Shurabil's position. Umar and his soldiers rallied. With Khalid at the front, the Muslims pushed back against Jabala's Ghassanid forces. After hours of brutal fighting, the Byzantines began to withdraw yet again. The fourth day ended with staggering losses on both sides. Thousands lay dead on the battlefield, but Vahan had failed to break the Muslims, and that failure was beginning to weigh on the morale of his army. The next morning, a Byzantine emissary approached Khalid with an offer of truce. After 4 days of intense fighting, Vahan hoped the Muslims would agree to end the battle. Khalid gathered his commanders. He listened to their opinions, some favored rest. Others wanted to accept the truce and consolidate their gains. But Khalid saw things differently. The past 4 days, he said, had tested their strength. But now it was time to finish this. The Byzantine army was exhausted. Its morale was cracking. If there was a moment to strike decisively, it was now. He refused the truce. Khalid then sent his trusted commander, Dirar, with 500 cavalrymen on a special mission to seize the bridge over the Rakat Gorge. This was the Byzantine army's main supply and communication line. If the Muslims controlled that bridge, Vahan's forces would have no escape route. On the 6th day of battle, the Byzantine commander Gregory, leading the right flank, rode out alone onto the battlefield. He was a seasoned warrior and wanted to challenge the Arabs directly, perhaps to boost the morale of his troops. Abu Ubaidah, the overall commander of the Muslim forces in Syria, accepted the challenge. Before riding out, Abu Ubaidah turned to Khalid and said, "If I fall, you take command of the army." Then the two warriors met in the middle of the field. The armies on both sides went silent, watching. The duel was fierce. Gregory tried a feint retreating, then spinning to strike, but Abu Ubaidah anticipated it. With one precise motion, he ducked under Gregory's sword and delivered a fatal blow to the neck. Gregory fell where he stood. The Byzantine lines shook with the weight of what had just happened. Khalid seized the moment. He had spent the night reorganizing his forces, spreading out formations to make the army look larger than it really was. His cavalry was hidden in shallow dips in the terrain, ready to strike. The Muslims surged forward. The Byzantines, tired and shaken, were caught off guard by the sudden offensive. Their superior numbers no longer gave them confidence. At first, the Byzantine lines managed to hold, but then Khalid unleashed his trap. With a roar, 8,000 Muslim cavalry galloped out from their concealed positions, sweeping toward the Byzantine left flank. Dust rose across the plain as Vahan turned to see the storm approaching. Realizing he had been outmaneuvered, he frantically sent what cavalry he had left to reinforce the flank. But it was too late. Khalid's cavalry smashed into Kanatir's Slavic forces like a hammer. The Slavic prince and Jabala's Ghassanid soldiers tried to hold, but the impact was overwhelming. Panic rippled through their lines. Jabala's men began to flee. Kanatir's Slavs were surrounded. To make matters worse for the Byzantines, when Jabala's soldiers fled toward the Rakat bridge, they found it already blockaded by Dirar's cavalry. Their only escape route was gone. Soldiers scattered in all directions. Kanatir's men fought bravely, but were surrounded and cut down. On the Byzantine left, their entire formation collapsed. In the center, Armenian and Greek units tried to hold, but chaos was spreading. Khalid, riding at the head of his cavalry, led a relentless charge through the ranks. Byzantine units broke apart. Some fled toward the cliffs. Others were cut off and slaughtered. The once mighty Byzantine army was disintegrating. The Armenian generals screamed for their men to hold formation, but the speed and mobility of the Arab cavalry made resistance impossible. Even the heavily armored cataphracts, the pride of Byzantine warfare, were surrounded and forced to flee, abandoning their infantry. As Khaled steadied his horse and looked out over the battlefield, the scale of the victory was clear. It wasn't immediate, but he knew the Battle of Yarmouk was won. The dust slowly settled over the Yarmouk plains. But for the Byzantine army, the nightmare was only beginning. Their formations had collapsed, their escape routes were cut off, and panic was spreading like wildfire through their ranks. The bridge over the Rakat Gorge, their only lifeline, was now firmly in Muslim hands. What began as a carefully coordinated imperial offensive had turned into a desperate fight for survival. Jabala's Ghassanid cavalry had already broken and fled, while Kanatir's Slavic warriors were trapped and surrounded. In the center, the Armenian and Greek forces tried to hold their ground, but Khalid's cavalry had punched through their flanks. Soldiers who had once stood in tight, disciplined formations were now scattered, disoriented, and vulnerable. The Armenian commanders shouted for their men to reform the line, but the sound of hooves, the clash of steel, and the cries of the wounded drowned out their orders. The once proud Byzantine cataphracts, their elite heavy cavalry, were now under assault from all directions. Outmaneuvered and outpaced, they began to fall back in disorder. Meanwhile, Khaled rode like a storm through the chaos. He was everywhere rallying his men, coordinating attacks, exploiting every weakness. His cavalry, light and mobile, moved like water through a cracked dam. Those who tried to flee found no escape. Many Byzantines were forced toward the steep cliffs that bordered the Yarmouk River, with nowhere to go. Entire units were pushed over the edge or cut down where they stood. The Armenian general Vahan watched in horror as his army disintegrated. He had entered the campaign with overwhelming numbers and the might of an empire behind him, but now all he saw was dust, blood, and defeat. Some Byzantine units tried to retreat in an organized fashion, hoping to reach the bridge, but Dirar's cavalry blocked their path. The bridge was jammed with panicked men, horses, and wagons. Many were trampled or fell into the gorge below. On the Muslim side, the commanders pressed their advantage with ruthless precision. Abu Ubaidah advanced the infantry to secure the center, while Khaled's cavalry swept across the battlefield, isolating and annihilating any remaining pockets of resistance. The battle that had raged for 6 days was ending in total Byzantine collapse. What had started as a strategic confrontation between two empires was turning into a slaughter. Vahan himself barely escaped the battlefield, fleeing north with a small group of survivors. Jabala, the Ghassanid leader, would later defect, entirely abandoning the Byzantine cause. The Slavic prince Kunatir fell with his men. Gregory, as history recorded, had already died in single combat with Abu Ubaidah. By the end of the day, tens of thousands of Byzantine soldiers lay dead or scattered. The Rashidun army, despite being outnumbered, had achieved one of the most stunning victories in military history. The victory at Yarmouk was not just a battlefield success, it was a geopolitical earthquake, with the Byzantine field army destroyed. Their grip over Syria effectively crumbled. Within months, the Muslim forces swept through Damascus, Emesa, and other key cities. Facing little organized resistance, Emperor Heraclius, receiving news of the disaster, was reportedly devastated. He had poured immense resources into this campaign, seeing it as the last chance to secure the empire's eastern frontier. Now, the gates of the Levant were wide open. Heraclius withdrew from the region, knowing the empire could no longer sustain the fight there. Syria, a province that had been part of the Roman Byzantine world for over 6 centuries, was now lost. The Rashidun Caliphate, on the other hand, was transformed by this victory. Yarmouk gave it control of one of the most important regions in the Near East, economically, culturally, and strategically. The road to further expansion into Palestine, Egypt, and beyond now lay open. Historians often debate why this battle, despite the Byzantines' overwhelming numerical advantage, ended in such a decisive defeat for them. There are several key factors. Leadership played a crucial role. Khaled ibn al-Walid was an exceptional battlefield commander. His mastery of mobile warfare, use of terrain, and perfectly timed cavalry strikes turned a defensive position into a devastating offensive. Morale and discipline were also decisive. The Muslim soldiers were fighting for a cause they deeply believed in, led by generals they trusted. They adapted quickly, held their lines under pressure, and counterattacked with precision. The Byzantine army, though large, suffered from internal divisions and overconfidence. Vahan's army was made up of Greeks, Armenians, Slavs, and Ghassanids, and coordination between these groups was fragile. The longer the battle went on, the more those divisions turned into liabilities. And finally, Khaled's decision to cut off the bridge at Rakad Gorge sealed the Byzantines' fate. With no retreat route, their army unraveled completely. The Battle of Yarmouk is often compared to other decisive clashes in world history because of how dramatically it shifted the balance of power. For the Byzantines, it marked the beginning of a long and irreversible retreat from the Levant. Though they would continue to exist for centuries, their empire was permanently weakened. For the Rashidun Caliphate, Yarmouk was the gateway to empire. Within a decade, Muslim forces would control an area stretching from the Nile to the Persian frontier. The battle cemented the caliphate's reputation as a rising power capable of defeating one of the most formidable military machines in the world. Khaled ibn al-Walid's reputation, already legendary, became immortal. His use of cavalry, flexible formations, and psychological warfare at Yarmouk is still studied by military historians today. What makes Yarmouk especially remarkable is not just the outcome, but how it was achieved. An outnumbered, lightly equipped army defeated a vastly superior imperial force through discipline, intelligence, and speed. Standing on the battlefield today, the wind still sweeps across the Yarmouk plains. It's a quiet place now, but in 636 it echoed with the roar of war, the clash of steel, and the cries of thousands. The soldiers who fought there changed the course of empires. The battle decided who would control Syria, but more than that, it shaped the trajectory of the entire Middle East for centuries to come. The Byzantine Empire never recovered its eastern provinces. The Rashidun Caliphate emerged as a dominant force. And Khaled ibn al-Walid, the Sword of Allah, secured his place in history as one of the greatest military commanders the world has ever known. This was not just a clash of armies. It was a turning point in history, the moment when one empire's dominion faded and another's began.